when the discussions around AI began to accelerate recently, I realized that my own response was very naturally open towards it, because I had already been making a film about a child who senses the death of a stone, like to overcome this distinctive, binaries. And so the arrival of artificial intelligence did not feel like an intrusion from the outside, like an alien force that had fallen from the sky to invade us, but it felt more like a mirror held up to our collective unconscious. If anything, I welcome it. And I felt that as people learn to relate to machine, almost as they relate to our other humans, a more expansive way of thinking might slowly take root as well. So a way of thinking that soften the division between what we call human and what we call non-human. And yeah, for years, my practice has proposed this kind of worldview in which the category of life extends far beyond the human. And it includes animals and plants, but also minerals, all these things. And, Jane Bennett's right in her book, Vibrant Matter, that every material holds onto it, the vitality that we must recognize, agency embedded in all things. This is why I speak about life in this broader sense, and why I want to keep expanding my work in these directions.
But if we just stay on the AI for a bit, before we move on to broader angles through which your work, you can look at your work, you just said that to you, the first encounter with AI was almost like there was an element of excitement because your work was already toying with these ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But then when the AI is here, maybe faster than we expected, you are saying that you're slightly reluctant or that there is some reservation.
Yeah, not about creating itself, to be honest. I am not particularly worried about AI will replace creative work, for instance. I mean, copyright issue must be addressed clearly, of course. And there are series of concerns here, but the idea that creating 300 text or video a day will somehow result in 300 video masterpieces feel very misguided, because masterpiece is not measured by quantity at the end of the day. I think it is shaped by very specific certain types of intention and resonance and the value system that structures of a specific value system, value structures of a specific society. So its nature cannot be mass produced, because meaning itself cannot be. Tools may change, but quality, vision, and purpose still matter more than speed. So in that sense, AI does not threaten the core of artistic creation and process for me. But I recently watched, Jeffrey, the figure who's called as a father of AI. Because of his interview, what concerns me more about is social and psychological landscape forming around this technology, because we are living in a time where algorithms create entire echo chamber, for instance, that confirm whatever belief we already hold. They push us further from nuance and from common sense, and further away from any shared reality. So I don't think there's any sharedity anymore. It's decreasing over time even more. So there is something deeply unsettling about the fact that my reality can drift far from yours, and simply because our digital environments feed us different versions of the world so rapidly. And all this happens, without us even noticing. And there are so many concerns. We also know that the most powerful actors in this space have little incentive to slow down. These systems are useful for every industry that relies on data. They are also useful for weapons and military technology. which means country will continue developing them regardless of the risk. I'm very sure of that. And at the same time, many of our current regulations were not designed for the threat that are emerging, like cyber attacks, impersonation attacks, fabricated voices that borrow someone's mannerisms. So these things are already so pro-life-ring, and they expose how fragile our sense of reality is. So yeah, I keep asking myself what kind of culture we are building when profit is seen as an ultimate obligation. Many companies insist that regulating AI would harm their competitiveness, especially with countries like China when it comes to the state or so. Yeah, but the real question is different, isn't it? It is whether we are willing to damage our own societies in order to compete. That's the phrase that I heard from the interview. And that question touches on the deeper ethical choices that technology forces us to confront. So yeah, my position is very mixture of hope and unease. I'm drawn to AI when it opens a wider imaginations around the non-human, especially. I resist it when it accelerates division, exploration, and erosion of this reality. Yeah.
But when it comes to your work, I guess that's where this conversation started in a way. You work in the digital realm. So one could think that is the base point at which AI starts to dominate, or it starts to damage society potentially, as you've quoted. As an artist, are you having to resist, especially since you work in the digital realm where potentially many processes can be streamlined, or for some shortcuts are quite obvious in a sense?
I think I can circle back to your question by answering about spirituality of technology, because I've been thinking about this a lot in relation to AI recently. Because digital art, especially for me, is not so different from spiritual practice. Both are attempts to understand the word, exactly, for sure. And they are two ways of asking the same question, in the sense that they touch each other very closely. And this is why I often return to the Lucas Brasky's writing on cinema in Sentence. I love his suggestion that film is device that pull back the traces of the dead, and the camera captures a moment of light and keeps it suspended. And when that moment is played again, it becomes a small act of summoning. And what we see on screen is always remnant of something that has already passed or passed away. So the person in the frame exists only through that absence. So cinema becomes a medium a lot of time that shimmers between what is present and what is not, a kind of ghostly technology. That's why I think there are so many questions around spirituality and technologies in this kind of sense that vibrates between life and disappearance. And from this perspective, even minor residues like after image noise and glitches or digital tears feel meaningful. In my last trilogy, I kept unexpected glitch in the final film, and I did not erase it because, well, I had much time, but it felt consistent with the understanding of film as a space where the material and immaterial rub against each other, and glitch can be read as a mechanical spiritual event, a specific moment where two realities rush past each other and leave a scar of light. So contemporary art is perhaps one of the few places where this thin edges between words can be test it openly without need to produce a clear production or so. So yeah, in this vein, AI has been really interesting to me. That kind of creation in the digital web, these ideas become even more pronounced because of AI. I feel like data remains, light appears, everyone can make their own reality, even though it could be like chambers, like images, move across a surface that has no physical body. Yet the viewer sit with this presence and absence as if they were witnessing something return. So yeah, in that sense, digital image also generated by AI generated images, all these things are inherently spectral and they are spiritual, not in a religious sense, but in their very condition as traces. So again, I'm open to it, but worry about other specific things in our fabric of our society. Yeah.
I guess as you speak about glitches and as you speak about dreams and spirituality, I'm reminded of Inception, for instance, film, where I guess it's all about our intentionality. It's almost like any world is possible as long as you can imagine it. And it's really interesting because I haven't really thought about it in that way. And I guess with this, it's pointing to intention. It's pointing to a kind of a clear vision. And I guess when we look at your work, it is amazing that this has been imagined. And I wonder how much of what you present us with is what you imagined.
I think we can start by just explaining my process, maybe just making process, because also part of language. It has something to do with language a lot. Because there is a scene in the trilogy when I use narration and subtitles in a very deliberate way throughout the whole trilogy. And for me, the emotional change of the moment deepened when hearing a voice while reading another form of language that sits slightly apart from it. And the spoken lines move with breath and rhythm, while the subtitles offer something closer to inscription. So one is intimate and bodily, and the other is carved into image like a symbolic trace. And that distance between the two creates a small tremor felt essential for the emotional tone I wanted. It is almost like two different layers of consciousness speaking at once. One comes from the body and the character, and the other rise from a deeper mythic register of the word. Yeah, but my process usually begins with reading. I spend a lot of time with mythic and symbolic text from different cultures, and certain phrases or images linger in me with a strong pull. So before I think about narrative structure, I write a poem and inspired by all these things. And it is rarely meant to be read aloud as poetry. It is more like an atmospheric seed and a place where the emotional texture appears before the logic does. So from this poem, I began shaping a storyboard though it is only ever loose skeleton throughout the developing process. And so this scene emerged from tone rather than plot. So when I move into actual making process, intuition takes over very quickly. I think it could be controversial whether you can see intuition is your intention as well. But once the word is built in Unreal Engine software I'm using, the word itself starts to lead me. Because there were lots of novelists saying that when they start write about there's a word, the characters alive and they kind of start to lead them. So in the same way, I might come in with particular intention beforehand, write about all the storyline, but something informed by the mythic sources I have been reading. Yet, as soon as I begin animating or placing the character, the logic just disappears a lot of time, and it just changes. It shifts from analysis to listening, and the world behaves in ways I could not really comprehend or predict it, and I try to follow sometimes it rather than control it. So I find that I found that very alive process. Most resonant moments come from that state. So it is a conversation with me and the world rather than a series of decisions.
And what about the role of technology in this? Technology being the Unreal Engine, the other tools that you use to construct these worlds and characters. Do those technologies give you also some constraints, or what are the possibilities?
Well, it's been only very recently that I start to enjoy the process of making, because I graduate BA and MFA for fine art. And I used to feel like really just one person weirdo we deal with 3D animations and all this technical stuff. So there were technicians and amazing tutors who helped me around, but when it comes to technical side, I only had YouTube and Google search and ChatGPT these days. So it has been just immense, frustrated process that I have no idea what is going on. And when the error comes up, no idea how to solve this. And when you have a deadline, when you're in the university, it just, drives you nuts. So technology side has been, so I was kind of jealous of the painters or sculptor. I'm sure they have their own frustrations, but at least in the making process, they seem to have more control than my process. So I think, but it's a very recent change that I've just started to feel that I'm in control of the engine I'm using, and that I can start to enjoy making process, compared to those past years.
And is this where the use of AI, for example, sorry, I'm circling here a bit, but is this maybe where the use of AI threatens you, or it makes you slightly unsettled? Because I guess on one hand, it took you time to achieve that kind of state of freedom with your medium, only now to have to surrender parts of it.
Not at all, not at all. I'm very delighted of the changes thanks to AI when it comes to shorten the process and efficiency, because there are still many mystified area that I don't really know how it works. Like when it comes to blueprints, when it comes to game making, modeling, UV, retopology, animating, rigging, all this stuff is very laborious process. And because I work alone, I collaborate with sound design and musicians, but when it comes to visual and constructing all these narratives, I work alone. So this development really enabled me to dive into the creative process that I wish I could focus earlier, rather than spending ages to figure out what is going on with this Unreal Engine project. So no, as a filmmaker and artist, I think I'm just very open to this development, if I don't mention about the other side effects of AI. Yeah.
And then when you say that you work alone, in some ways, I don't want to say it's unusual because artists work alone, but the scale of the production sometimes, and your work really is so impressive, I should say. I guess the fact that it's made by one person to like the visual narrative aspects of it, of course, we give credit to sound designers and other collaborators that do fragments of it. But in a way, you imagine the world, you construct the world. Is this what you mean by feeling a bit like a spiritual practice? The fact that this process of making is such a consumed, it's like a consumed process.
Mm-hmm. So do I find
So I guess whether it's in the process of making, of being a kind of solitary maker of this narrative and this world and these characters, is that in that there are also elements of like spiritual practice almost.
That's really interesting question. I've never thought about that way because to be just 100% honest with you, the only reason why I work alone is because of the budget issue. So if I have more budget or more funding in the near future, then I love to work with other people, and I like to expand my practice into working with actual actor, other experimental filmmakers do. A lot of time they assemblage real actors and 3D animation or live shooting, all these things. So I really want to expand my practice into that. But I do meditate, and I like to be alone. I'm only child, and but I thought my disposition is very independent because of this. That when I moved to London, I realized, wow, it's really feel hollow and distant, everything, because there was no network. I started to, it feels like all the process I've been building is cut down and start everything from zero. So the space, like London itself and the university I went to, they felt very distant from me because that was just neutral space rather than being a place to me with a set of network and relationship. So yeah, I would work with other people to collaborate with others. Yeah.
Yet you found something in London. Now, when you mention London, when you mention this epic journey from South Korea to London, have you found something in London? Is there something about the city that informs the work? Your first line is that you're based in London, so there must be something about the city.
I first came in 2017 for my foundation course at Goldsmiths. I couldn't follow how native speakers talk or speak, so the communication was a big part that I was struggling. But what mattered even more was realizing I had to rebuild every network, as I said. That was the first time I really felt that a space is not shaped only by its physical form. I began to feel that place, whether large or small, is held together by the relationship inside it and invisible bonds between people, not really made by its material structures only, but produced through the relations that flow through it. But things began to change in my second year when I had to help my third years prepare their degree show, and groups of 6 or 7 of us spent 2 weeks repairing exhibition space all together. It was such an intense period. But it was the first time that I felt something in my London life really open up, thanks to that people and relationship, because we became close as we work, drinking beer in daytime and going to the pub after we finished. So we shared a common purpose, and the whole process involved a lot of care as well and support in the condition of the educational system. So through that, I developed a very close friendship with my British mate. And once the bond was there, meeting other artists and friends became much, much easier. So yeah, I have come to think that feel content in a city, you need more than one solid group. So you need several small circles that you can move between. And those small moments of feeling welcomed make everything so different. So having a few groups, individual with whom I share something meaningful, became what London was for me. That was the first time I felt I had a permission to actually belong here, only when I began to feel accepted by the people living here. Yeah.
Well, I guess I love actually that your point of reference is more of a ecological space of the city, because actually the way you see the city it's a network, and I actually think that's so interesting, and I think that's what makes you an artist. Whereas architects would always talk about city as the built environment, literally like something that you have to construct in your work and then put characters in it. So maybe if I can then transport you into the other part of your mind, which is the constructing cities and worlds. Is there anything in London that has informed the way you build worlds?
Sorry, when you say you wonder, you sound skeptical. To be honest, because London has been, my experience in London has been largely equivalent to the university I went to and the people I met. So to answer your question, I think I should go back to my childhood, that how I was influenced by my father to build my world. If you don't mind explaining this side a bit more.
Yes, no, absolutely.
Yeah, so I feel that I grew up in an environment where the boundaries between reality and fiction was never fixed. Because my father is a mime artist and my mom directed theater, and they met through making performance together. So because of that, I spent my early years constantly surrounded by one person shows, mime, and many kinds of performances. And watching my dad on stage became just such a natural part of my daily life. So what stayed with me most about theater was the way the stage and the audience create two distinct yet connected worlds. And when the performance begins, the auditorium sinks into darkness and only the stage is lit. This kind of fictional time opens, and a word that is not our everyday word begins to unfold through the performer's body. But theater, despite being fiction, is grounded entirely in presence. It insists on what happens here and what happens here and now, and the body becomes the force that reshapes space, and the stage is never static. So it is performative space that keeps shifting according to how it is used, and it reveals a place where reality and imagination overlaps. So when the performance ends, the light returns. The division between stage and audience rapidly disappears again, and I find myself sitting in the reality of the auditorium. There was something powerful in the moment. I remember that the word that felt real, Onya Sekme, has just vanished, yet it remains inside my body as another lived reality. So it made me understand very early on that fiction is not secondary. It has its own weight and presence as much as the reality we live in. It's slightly off the topic, but my dreams strengthen that sense even further. Like I dream vividly every single night when I'm in a dream, and I do not know it is a dream. I live through it fully, and when I wake up, the sensations remain so vividly, like something I have genuinely inhabited. So in the moment between dreaming and waking, I feel myself caught between the two reality. My body becomes a threshold between them, and I understand both as equally real. Because of all this, I never believed that there is only one single reality. Several layers of reality coexist, and I move between them freely. So mime as art form clarify this even more. It is, in my understanding, it is an art form almost entirely from the body, with no props and no set, and a lot of time the performer builds houses, like raise a wall and create an object only through gestures. So fiction is lived directly through the body, and the boundary between reality and imagination becomes irrelevant, and the intensity of presence makes the fiction very tangible. So performance is inherently self-referential, as you know, and at the same time, it constructs new world as well. So that experience, the whole experience impressed on me very deeply, and that fiction can be just as real as anything else. So when I work, I feel that building a word and letting it exist as a reality in its own right is essential. unlike my father, whose body becomes the medium of the word I want, of the word I want. I want the word I create to stand as expanded realities with the same weight as the one we live in. And that's why I have never felt any sense of strangeness of towards virtual world, metaverse, or artificial intelligence, or augmented reality. They have always felt completely natural to me rather than separate from life. So even though I make films, use of Unreal Engine makes me feel that I am constructing a space rather than simply arranging a scene from the camera. The sensation of building the space rather than illustrating comes from growing up, like inside my parents' practice, watching them create entire world through performance, I would say. So yeah, it shaped the way I understand what a word can be. Yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting that you're describing it in theatrical terms and you're using theater to describe where things originate in terms of your sense of space and your sense of reality and world. And certainly theater is that place where world is built, and we then have to inhabit it or project onto it. But in theater, let's say, the world that's in front of us is in the service of the narrative. It's supposed to hold the narrative. So what we see in theater is a world that's supposed to hold a certain narrative, and that world can be located, right, in the history, or it can be located geographically if a story is happening in Venice or it's happening in New York, or so on and so on. And so that world that we see on the stage will be some kind of interpretation of Venice or of New York. And I guess then we could expand this conversation into what real worlds inform your world. Like, is it distant landscapes? Is it urban conditions? I wonder which things that exist inform or inspire, or where do you take from the physical structure of the world, or the physical fabric of the world? Where does that come from?
Yeah.
Places that inspire you, or
one of the important thread that runs through my work is the idea of mourning and of welcome, because many of my most direct experience from these emotions came from Korea growing up, and so they shape both who I am and the work I make. For instance, when I was in high school, like more than 10 years ago, gosh, ferry carrying hundreds of students my age sank, and more than 300 lost their lives. And just a few years ago, more than 100 people were crushed in the street in Seoul. And when I was young, more than a few hundred other people died in the fire in the underground. And just a year before I was born, there were major, massive disasters in Seoul where the whole department store and the bridge collapsed. So many of these tragedies were caused obviously by negligence and by a society that prioritized speed and efficiency. But I felt Korea so erased the traces very quickly, and there was very little space for remembrance and grieving. And in the midst of this, I also noticed people I love who took their own life, and many of us were expected to move on so quickly from this, because death is often seen and considered as something frightening and shameful that needs to be overcome without any delay. But people who have gone, whether I knew them or loved them, have always returned in new forms within me. I feel like there were moments when it felt as if my life was becoming a funeral for losses that had never been mourned properly. So I often like to think about Derrida's saying that a failed mourning is the only successful mourning, because mourning has no end and only those who fail at it succeed. That's the reason why I want to explore that praise of mourning in my work, as the foundation of that experience is deeply connected to my life in Korea, while losing someone you love, and one of the most universal experiences in the world. I often ask myself how on earth people endure it and keep living, because it literally happens to everyone. Yeah, so that question also enters my work. Excuse me. And on that note, for me, I think mourning, sorry, is close to an act of welcome as well. It is a way of placing another life inside my own body and letting that life continue within myself and within the digital world I build. So I cannot think of a great form of welcome that allowing someone who has gone to live on in that way. So yeah, this has been very crucial part forming my work, referencing of the real world, I would say.
And Unjo, is that where the, I guess the question is that maybe where the rubble comes from?
Yeah, for sure. I recently watched, have you watched the Guillermo, the Frankenstein movie?
Or the Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein? No, I haven't actually.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. And at the very end, I don't think this is spoiler, so I would say there's just one line stayed with me. It said, like, the heart will break, yet we shall live on in that brokenness. And that sentiment felt profoundly present to me so far, as if it comes from life itself rather than from a desire to uplift or reassure. Like, people collapse so easily in both material and emotional ways anyway in life, and it's shaped by continuous impact. And most of us do not experience a grand turning point that sends us back into the world renewed, or yeah, just the much of life is lived in a state of permanent fracture and breaking down. So I think that is where our unconscious archetypes speak most honestly. So yeah, perhaps that's why I am very much drawn to the image of the ruins and dystopian words. This apocalyptic sensibility acknowledges despair and cynicism, yet does not collapse beneath them. So showing filth or discomfort or the symbolic fragments of ruin in this such ordinary way of where it carries deep meaning for me. And I do not wish to exhibit despair nor intensify despair, nor intensify it, nor offer a form of redemption either. When I create this visual world, my intention is not to construct an apocalyptic universe, nor to invent an ecosystem fighting desperately for survival either. What interests me is the way life twists and continues within unstable and disoriented conditions. And I want to explore narratives that reflect the parts of the world we cannot fully understand or comprehend, to think about the arrangement of life within this uncertainty, as life and death, sit so close together, and their boundaries often feel paper thin. So a figure dancing inside a ruin, for example, in my film, with their back against the wall, and the body pressed by darkness can be sad, yet strangely beautiful at the same time. Rock, a quiet form of affirmation. It's very life affirming to me. So that is kind of effect I want to offer by depicting this ruins and dystopian vibe. And such encouragement can feel violent to someone who is living inside despair. And I am try to be really careful not to impose that. And I want to work to treat despair as something ordinary, something that belongs to life rather than an alien state of being. So yeah, I'm drawn to characters in works through wounded landscapes, then twisted in shape, attempting to care for stone or guarding bones that were never buried, or searching for new forms of ritual, searching for new forms of consciousness. So yeah, these gestures are not very heroic, I would say. They are quite attempts to, they're very, very quiet attempts to sense the world from within its fractures. And I want to keep experimenting with this, symbolic images and stories in this context.
I guess I'm thinking of the lullaby of the ruins and actually other of your works where almost the characters are part of the environment. And it's only now, as you're speaking, I'm seeing it a bit more clearly, because I go on and on asking about the environment, and I was gonna then switch to asking about the characters. But now, as you've explained, it feels like characters and environment are. I don't know. Now I'm projecting my own reading onto it based on what you've said, but it feels like they are the same thing. And actually, I'm just reminded, and I'm thinking about characters that are themselves ruins, that are themselves like stone, and that them and the environment, there is a close proximity. Am I reading this correctly?
Yeah, very much. Thanks so much for putting it that way. I think, I'd love to talk about the character on that note. Your understanding is absolutely right, and I relate so much. But also there is the aspect of monstrosity I really like to focus on. So in my work, monstrosity is not about strange or unsettling forms. It grows out a long history of how, because monstrosity, when we see the concept of it, it grows out how humans have imagined the other. And in my understanding, records of this monstrous race go back as early as 5th century or something, and remained popular through the medieval period as well. And their mixed body reflected the confusion early Western travelers felt when encountering unfamiliar cultures or races. And many people believe that exotic beings live at the edges of the unknown world or so. And when we see the word monstrosity comes from the Latin monstrule, sorry about my pronunciation, which means to show or to warn. So that's really interesting because it has been understood as something, monstrosity, it means has always understood something visual all the time. With the rise of modern scientific explanation, many of these earlier forms were pushed into realm of myth or fictional words for sure, and contemporary ideas of monstrosity shift towards this moral and behavior forms rather than appearance. But within Western tradition, human beings were long considered separate from other animals as well because of reason and the soul, and drawing the boundaries was central to defining what were counted as normal. So human monsters have historically given shape to unspoken anxieties in society by making the formless visible and containable. So what I find interesting is mythology changes everything in this vein. Like Roland Barthes, again, sorry for pronunciation of the name, that wrote that.
Roland Barthes, yeah.
Barthes, that myth does not deny things, but gives them clarity and legitimacy. Because the mythical creature is an idea made tangible, and through that material presence, myth allows to give meaning to to what would otherwise remain beyond understanding. So in popular culture, the same dynamic continues these days, I think. Even in stories without human protagonists, most central characters still resemble humans, and many mainstream works introduce at least one human viewpoint to secure an emotional anchor for viewers, or for the audience. And monsters in children's media, for instance, tend to be charming and fluffy and friendly, which reinforces human normality rather than challenging it. So in my own practice, the characters begin with the meta-human system in Onyo engine. This is partly for practical reason, as it allows me to allows me to work effectively, but it also aligns conceptual way with my interest in the boundaries between this human nature and the monstrous. So I start with human blueprint and attach different fragment object on top of the body and form as if assemble a collaging on top of a body. And through this, I try to create beings that hold humans, nature, monsters, the sentient, and the margin, the self, and the other within a single presence. So when the actor who played Frankenstein was cast to play the creature, I think the director once said that the reason why he cast the actor Jacob was because of his eyes. And I understand that very immediately when I saw his interview, because even when the body becomes strange and unfamiliar, the eye can still hold the emotion and give the audience room and point for a connection with a being that sit outside the humans. But at some point, I may explore a more radically non-human beings without eyes and still find ways for the audience to feel empathy. But for now, presence of the eyes has allowed me to push the visual strangeness while keeping emotional point of contact. So this connects to theme of welcome and mourning to me. Yeah, that's what I want to say. So yeah, I mean, philosophers often say that recognizing the face of other is the starting point of hospitality. Yet I wonder whether hospitality can exist even without that direct encounter in my future work. If we cannot see your face, does that necessarily close the possibility of care, for example? And perhaps hospitality is less about the visible face and more about the capacity to reach across time and space and abstraction to meet another being. So yeah, in this kind of context, I intentionally tried to come up with monstrous being, but has human eyes for peoples to be connected into something that is unknown and mystified. Yeah.
I don't know if it's Roland Barthes or if it's some other linguistic philosopher from the same school of thought talking about, it might well be Roland Barthes, talking about that gap between understanding and not understanding, because basically you can't reveal, there has to be an element of mystery, but then if the mystery is too mysterious, then the gap is too wide for a member of the audience to bridge. So to drive a narrative, it's a very fine line between how much you give and how much you don't give. And it's interesting that you talk about that in the context of literally the characters that you build and the spaces that you build.
So when I create my characters, I usually imagine their personality and background in quite detailed way. But until now, I've never felt that the need to weave those stories directly into the films. So for instance, in The Lullaby of the Ruins, the main character has a name called Halia. and in my mind, she once lived as a wanderer on wide open plains and lived ordinary life until one day she was found out by the people who lives in the ruins. So she grew up among them and lived on that ordinary life. All this blah blah blah. But this background narrative exists, but I have kept them outside of the film. But in the future, perhaps with a longer production process, I may allow this story to enter work in more cinematic way. But for this trilogy, the thing I wanted to focus on and test most was intentional silence and a certain refusal to guide the viewer. Because it becomes easier, quite clear early in the film that they do not try to explain what exactly is happening in this world, or how this ecology functions, or what purpose of each section of areas serve. So even so, I hope the viewer is willing to stay with me, stay with the work kindly, and then meet on its own terms. So what I want to invite is sensitivity to the possibility of feeling empathy for a being that one does not really understand. Because after all, in daily life, we constantly meet others we cannot fully understand, or sometimes do not try to understand, and yet those encounters continues and form the large part of the fabric of life. And I wanted to suggest that this state of not understanding does not need to block a deeper connection when we live our lives. So I have always thought that hospitality and mourning for beings who do not fall within the familiar category of the normal will not emerge from a clear intellectual gap. They belong to the realm of sensation, for example, and empathy is a crucial act that crosses time, space, and abstractions, and it attempts something almost impossible, and that impossibility is precisely what deepens our sense of welcome towards another being that can understand. And this is why I chose to work with deliberate silence and with strange arrangement of everyday object in my film. Yeah.
There's also, I guess there is an important role that time plays in your work. And specifically, I'm thinking this summer, we had a privilege to watch your films in full, the three of them, and the trilogy. And I feel like you give us real time to indulge in these worlds and to follow the characters. They are slow, I would say, or they might not be slow. You might not see it as slow, but they're slow by our human standards, let's say. So maybe it's the fact that gravity is different in that world, and that therefore it's slower in comparison to us, our world being a point of reference. But there is something in that. I think it's like it's an arc. It's a narrative arc, or it's an arc of time that is clearly also very intentional. And I just wonder, how do you think about time and speed? Because it goes back to this idea of this gap, the attention gap of like, I guess, someone who's watching the work. Or
Yeah. So when I think about the time, I often go back to this classic theory of Deleuze and his ideas of movement image and the time image. I'm not trying to apply his theory in very academic way, but these ideas help me to understand my images for time and how viewers actually experience my work when it comes to time management. Because the movement image is built on action. Every events push time forward, characters make decisions, and one shot naturally lead one another. And the viewers follow the clear direction, anticipate what comes next. but my work has very little interest in that kind of rhythm. Not only about the time, but also when it comes to action as well. So in my film, the pressure to advance is almost absent, and the character are now moving towards the goal, and the space do not serve a purpose either. So instead, the image often stays still, almost suspended, allowing time to unfold from within the scene itself. So yeah, this is why I feel my practice sits much closer to Blue's called the time image. And in the time image, time does not follow action. It appears directly on the screen. And when action no longer guide the scene, the viewer is released from the habit of prediction, and they start to sense the density of the moment, the weight of duration, the vibration of something that does not need to progress in order to exist. And that moment of saying, that space where nothing seems to happen yet everything quickly shifts, is what I find most meaningful in my work. So, and yeah, I also think the digital age has deepened this kind of experience. Like, people often talk about digital cinema in terms of speed and production technology, but I think the most fundamental change lies in perception itself, like real-time rendering, looping structures, and database-based editing, all create very different forms of time. So time becomes layered, reverse, or this, or like atmospheric. The viewer does not simply follow the work; they just dwell. They can just dwell in it, and inside the dwelling, a different kind of thoughts start to appear. So that's the point I enjoy.
Is this where maybe there is a certain distinction or a certain difference in expectations when it comes to film that is produced for a cinema and maybe film that is produced to occupy spaces in a more relaxed way? So your work can sit in a gallery and you're an artist. The first time I experienced your film was in an exhibition. So I came in at some point and I left at some point, and there was not a clear beginning and the end. And I just wonder if this is a consideration as well. And that's something that allows you to be confident in your approach to time, which might not always satisfy a cinema audience, but it operates in a slightly different way.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I value about galleries is that they function as space for discussion and really accessible. So people often walk in, look at a part of the work and leave. And my work follows that rhythm, as just you mentioned, and loops becomes the basic structures, and the beginning and ending stays open pretty much. So in this setting, completeness is not narrative closure, but the rhythm of circulation. And because the viewer can enter at any point, the exhibition has its own aesthetics separate from cinema. But I think at the end of the day, I really want to I want to work in a way that moves between media installation and the film world, in the similar way of the Julian Roosevelt.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I'm pretty much aware though that the grammar of the film festival is very different from freedom I feel in the contemporary art scene. So Julian's manifesto can be a good example. Like, the work began as 13 multi-channel video installation, but he later edited to fit in the cinematic festival. So, but at the same time, I have often felt that my practice sit at a certain distance from what is usually called media art. And that's my concern recently, because artists like Sandra Mujinga create highly conceptual scenes using green screen or black backgrounds with performers, and whose presence feels more about investigate and analytical. And Martin Sims, I think, works with everyday photography, advertising formats, memes, or archival material to speak about cycling history. So it is a lot of time it is very documentary attitude, isn't it? So they question about relationship with technology through artificial intelligence and all this, entanglement through aesthetics of documentary. So the work of these intentionally active media artists speak about philosophy and concept that come directly from reality, and they take the real world as their starting point and often assemble everyday footage or reframe social phenomena to reveal hidden layers. But to be honest, I'm not really interested in the combination of conceptual art and documentary aesthetics for my own practice. I appreciate the work for sure, but the same goes for these types of abstract media work that I admire this project when they do generative visual animations of microorganisms, simulations, or electric systems, all this, like APA website. But it's not where my desire lies. I want to shape meaning myself through complete control and construct actual word from inside. So what I want to build a word is entirely different from our current reality. And when it comes to visual, I mean, and allow the ecology inside that word to function on its own terms so that the intention and message arise from within the word. And in that sense, my work is closer to magical realism or mythic realism or what is called digital method poetics. So when I was studying at Oxford and show my work in the meet and create, I was told that my work is too often cinematic, which did not really surprise me because, it was also a comment on the way my imagery seems to stand at some distance from actual appearance of reality. I'm naturally drawn to how Julian or Matthew Barney or Alexander Jodorowsky or Apichalcon, who use this aesthetic of cinema, but approach reality at the level of consciousness, myth, and symbolic structures in the sense where the work becomes post-cinematic. It's close to the Lewis idea of the image and thought where the work.
It's amazing. We've gone through kind of a history of 20th century philosophy and art to a degree, but we've skipped surrealists somehow. But I don't know, maybe intentionally or.
I think it's just all connects within this ontological reflection. But I mean, my working method before is not to choose one scene or one field, but to move between reading of both and building a hybrid ecology. So I would say there's some surrealism aspect in there. And when the image is not treated as a representation of the world, but as an event that brings a word into being, a different form of practice becomes possible, then there's also room for surrealism comes in, I guess. And
I guess the use of motifs and objects and animals and things like that are sometimes out of place, but somehow we then project meaning to them.
Sure. Because throughout my work, I have long questioned the familiar habit of dividing technology and nature, animals, humans, as if they belong to opposite worlds. So we tend to imagine natural nature as pure and original, white, regarding technology as something artificial and centered on human intention. And the more I think about it, the more it becomes clear that humans are not separate from nature and animals. So we are one expression of it, and technology we built on are shaped from same material fabric as well. Every device we rely on carries the minerals of the earth, aluminium, silicon, and we have animal instinct as well. So even the most advanced satellites to large building begins with matter drawn from the crust and energy that arises from the sun. So yeah, this kind of hybrid being that appears in my work grow out of this view. They are not meant to sit between the organic and the artificial, but they show what happens when the boundaries softens and new forms of being begin to surface, and their body mix textures that belong to the flesh with surface that suggest metal, digital sheen. So yeah, the result is something unfamiliar yet oddly intimate. So, and these forms don't come from the idea that technology rests on top of nature or human rests on top of nature, but from the sense that everything has always lived together and interconnected to each other.